Hi everyone, thanks for joining us for Politically Incorrect Knitters. I'm Deplorable Knitter, and this week, unfortunately, Pinkava is not here. She is on her way home from Romania, so thanks for all the thoughts and prayers for her. I know that a lot of people were commenting that they hoped she got home safe, and last I heard, I think she's in Denver, so she's doing well. So this week I am joined, I have a very special guest, but before I introduce her, I just want to remind you that we are still doing the giveaway for a copy of Cody Schlegel's Odyssey Tale, great, awesome, non-woke adventure story based on Odyssey. And we're giving away either this hard copy or a audio copy. So when you win, you get to choose. And also, we have our beautiful yarn from Chicken Lady Fiber Arts. This is her DK sock Patriot Bouquet. You can enter to win that. And if you cannot wait, make sure that you use our code PIK hot as heck 20 for 20% off your purchase at chickenladyfiberarts.com. So this week I have a super special guest. We are joined by Durenda Wilson, the author of The 4-Hour School Day, and we're also going to do a giveaway for her book so you guys can see why I fell in love with it and I listen to her podcast all the time. So Durenda, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I didn't know who you were until I randomly came across your book, and I was hanging out at the library listening to it, and it was like you knew all the things that I worry about as a homeschooling mom, and I had to talk to you. So can you tell our people a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. I am Durenda Wilson, and I am married to Daryl. We have been married for almost 33 years. That sounds so long. And but it seems like just yesterday that we got married, and yet it doesn't, I don't know how to explain that, but been married for 33 years, and we have 8 kids, 5 boys and 3 girls. They are ages 31 down to 17. And we have our 9th grandbaby coming here in a few weeks. And out of the 9, 7 are boys. And so I think we have a thing for boys, evidently. And
crazy.
yeah, so I'm the author of The 4-Hour School Day. About 6 or 7 years ago, I wrote a book called The Unhurried Homeschooler. And that's just a tiny little, it's a simple, mercifully short book on homeschooling. And so I always tell people, if you liked that little book, you'll love The 4-Hour School Day, because it's kind of like an expanded version of that. And then I also have a little devotional that I wrote for homeschooling moms called Unhurried Grace for Mom's Heart. So those are my 3 books. And yeah, my family is my life, and I love it.
Yeah, and you also, I've read The Unhurried Homeschool, which I just read it this past weekend. It took me about an hour. It was perfect because
it's a quick one.
So busy. Yeah, I've been so busy that I was like, okay, I can do this. And while I was reading it, I was kind of excited. Like, we started school this week, and I'm like, oh, I need to go down into the schoolroom and get this ready and that. It kind of, I don't know, I just felt better about it after reading the book. It was exciting.
Yeah, it kind of motivated you, inspired you. Yeah. That's great. I think that's, something that is so important, that families are inspired, not burdened by the idea of homeschooling, because it really is so doable. And I think that's the main reason I wrote both books, but specifically The 4-Hour School Day, because people think, oh my gosh, I can't spend 8 hours a day teaching my kids. Well, guess what? I can't either. And we homeschooled all of our kids all the way through. And so we've got 7 graduated. We have one left. And boy, I wouldn't change a thing. And the way we did it was very unconventional. It was such a good fit for our family. And in fact, I thought it was so unconventional that I shouldn't write about it. My husband was the one who said years ago you should write a book on homeschooling. And I'm like, what? Yeah. I was like, nobody wants to read about our homeschooling. It was simple. It was basic. And he's like, no, I think that's why you should write a book on homeschooling. So I was like, okay. So I wrote The Unhurried Homeschooler, and oh my goodness, I don't know where we're probably at. I probably have sold 40,000 copies of that. And the typical sales in the whole life of a self-published book, because it was just a self-published book, is about 3,000 copies. So, and it's just still selling like hotcakes. And I'm just like, I don't do anything to like promote it or anything like that. People just find it and they tell people about it, or they'll keep extra copies at home. So if someone says, oh gosh, I'm thinking about homeschooling, read this book, you know, it's an hour long, you can do an hour. And so, so I guess that's kind of word of mouth. I'm telling you, when it comes to moms, it's the best. Because it comes with a reference, and it comes, you know, with someone saying, hey, I've read this, and I think this will be helpful to you. So anyway, so yeah. And so I guess what I found out through all of that was that there were a lot of other moms out there who felt the same way about homeschooling their kids, but they were afraid to admit it, or afraid to move forward, or afraid that it wouldn't be enough. And so being that person on the other end now, I can look back and say, it was the best choice for our family. And I think moms know their kids better than anyone. And, you know, a good parent, they just know their kids better than anyone. You're more invested in your kids than anyone. You care more about their future than anyone. So why wouldn't you be the best person to, I call it, facilitate their education? Because there's so much that you're not going to teach them that they're going to teach themselves, first of all, or they're going to just learn from someone else, or even from each other. That was the other thing I realized, that my kids actually helped educate each other. And that was really fascinating to see. But when everyone's loving learning, that's how it works. So I felt like my main job was just don't burn them out on learning. That was my main goal. Like they can, let's just do this in a way that we're still stoking that, you know, that fire for learning, because they come to us wanting to learn, right? They're curious by nature, right? There's no little kid out there that isn't curious about things. And so our job is just to encourage that, give them an environment that feeds that and lets them do it, and let them follow those interests all the way till they're sick of the idea and they move on to something else. So we did that over and over and over again. And it just made homeschooling so much fun.
Yeah. And I just really enjoyed the fact that so we live in a world of social media now, right? Like everything you see is perfect. Like I love the people who put up their homeschool spaces. I think it's so cool to see what other people are doing. Mine does not look anything like that. I've got a bookshelf, I've got a little table, but we live in this world of everything is perfect, everything is set up nice, and so I think that's part of the appeal of your approach, is because you're not saying, oh yeah, my kids did soccer and dance and did this and that, and I was shut. No, you guys like hung out at your house and you did what you had to do, and it's so nice, because I get a lot of people who say things to me like, oh, well, since you homeschool, you know, they should be playing a sport and they should be doing this and they should be, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't think they want to do that. Like, you know, there are some things they're interested in and we do let them do that, but we're not the parents. And the other thing, I could go on and on, but we live in such a society where the kids are in charge of the family.
Exactly.
And I don't want to do that. Like, I'm not going to be like, oh no, you can't go play soccer if you want to, but also we're not going to do a travel team. We're not going to be gone every weekend. We're not going to, because you're not running the show.
Right.
You're the kid.
Right. And here's the thing. It's probably mainly because you understand that your family life is important, and that your routine is important, and that building a strong home life is important. I always say that school should revolve around home, not home around school. Mm-hmm. And so if we make family life a priority, and what that means is we do our part as the parents, we remain the parents, we remain in charge, we remain the ones making the decisions. And of course, we consider the things that our kids might be interested in, or of course, every good parent would. I mean, that's just almost doesn't even need to be said, but it's so, right. Things are so ridiculous now that you almost have to say it. and you know, we had discipline in our home. We had order in our home. The kids were not allowed to speak to each other or to me in a disrespectful way. And if we saw those patterns starting, we nipped it in the bud. Right. We had plenty of consequences for poor behavior for not following through on tasks they were supposed to do. That was a lot of our life. And now, if you talk to my kids, any of our kids, first of all, they would say they wouldn't change a thing about how they were raised and about, homeschooling. None of them ever resented the fact that we homeschooled the whole time we were doing it and afterwards. And I think that had much more to do with, first of all, our attitude towards them, we saw our kids as a blessing. We saw them as, we wanted them, we valued them, but we also valued the family setting where their dad is dad, mom is mom, and they work as a team, and the kids, they do what mom and dad tell them to do. And we gave them free time, but we also had some directed learning, and we had self-directed learning. We had I think it's a balance of both. There was a little bit of, there was just directed learning in the morning. It was very basic, basically the 3 R's when they were in kindergarten to 8th grade. Science and history were supplemental. And I actually have a podcast coming out next week, 2 of them, on a simple unhurried approach to elementary school science, or science in the elementary years. And then the other one is science in the high school years. And the gal who's on there with me she writes science curriculum. She was a homeschool mom. I mean, this woman is a pro. She's a professional. And she said, you do not have to have any curriculum in K through 8th grade when it comes to science. And so there shouldn't ever be, you shouldn't worry about doing science every day in kindergarten to 8th grade. And that was really nice for me. I was like, well, I feel affirmed. I mean, I'm pretty much done, but yeah. But it was, I just knew that was right for our kids. And the reason that I felt like it was right is because I thought about how much I remember of science and history from elementary school. Not very much, only the things that I was really interested in. But then when I got in high school, I felt like I think developmentally, we're better able to wrap our heads around the big picture of science and the big picture of history. And so we were more focused in the high school years. We did have some sort of something solid, a curriculum or a class or something for those subjects. Now I just totally went off the beaten path here. But my point,
okay.
But my point is that the kids were no worse off for us taking that path that we felt like was right for our kids and right for us. It's what I had to keep looking at. So what breathes life into our family, and recognize when things were sucking the life out of our family, and then adapt and adjust things accordingly. Now, sometimes the kids were sucking the life out of the family because I had, for whatever reason, had been letting them get by with things that I shouldn't have and hadn't noticed. And all of a sudden I wasn't enjoying them anymore, and they weren't enjoying each other anymore. And I had to sit back and watch. I was a big fan of being a student of the kids. Okay, something's going on here. I can't quite put my finger on it. So I'm just going to sit back and watch the happenings in our house. And I just watch. And pretty soon it would become really clearly evident. Oh, I see what's happening here. These kids are, they're talking to each other like they shouldn't. These two are going at it constantly. So we need to do something with that. But I was laughing the other day because our kids, we have a family group text. It's hilarious. But the kids were talking about how moms were allowed to be mean in the 90s. And started talking about the different ways that I implemented discipline. And I said, I really think this should be a podcast, you guys, seriously, because I think the statute of limitations is over. So nobody's going to come and arrest me. But I mean, it was things like the two boys just fighting over a pair of handcuffs, just like, no, they're mine. No, I was playing with them. And I'm like, okay, you guys knock it off. Okay, work it out. Come on, figure it out. Not happening. Finally, I grab the handcuffs. I handcuff them together. I bring him to the bathroom. I give him a sponge and some whatever cleaner. And I say, clean this bathtub, handcuffed together, because you two clearly need to learn to get along. So do it. And so I left, and they come out and they're still handcuffed, and they're begging me to take the handcuffs off because it's too hard. And, And I'm like, nope, you need to do this. And so they went back in, and it was just lots of funny things like that. You kind of have to keep your sense of humor as a mom. And I think that's one of the downsides of social media, like you were mentioning. There's all these images and words floating around out there that are constantly like condemning us and keeping us from mothering like the way that we feel is right for our family, and I think that's one thing that I think was a huge blessing for me, because there was no internet when I started. Of course, halfway through that entered the picture, but still it didn't have like a big influence on what I thought about how I was parenting. There was still mom guilt. There were still other people doing things that I wasn't doing that I thought, oh gosh, I'm a terrible mother, terrible homeschooling mother. And then I would just get over it, because the truth is that we were made for our kids. And I think that we just have to understand that I think God very intentionally put us together. He knew what kind of mom we would be. And that doesn't mean that we're not trying to improve, that we're not trying to, get a grip on maybe some areas we're struggling in. I know some people struggle with yelling at their kids, and that's something that you definitely need to get a grip on, but that's the beauty of parenting and homeschooling, is you walk away a better person, hopefully, from the experience as well. So I feel like I learned more from my kids than they learned from me, because just the ways that I had to grow up and stop being selfish and stop feeling sorry for myself, and realize that I had an opportunity every day to pour love into these kids. And when I say love, I don't just mean, oh, honey, it's okay. I don't mean that, because that's not the kind of mom I am. I would say love is discipline, it's order, it's relationship with your kids, taking the time to really know them and continue to know them, because they keep changing as they get older, and them knowing that you're there for them 100%, and yet you're not going to put up with their crap either. If I can say that word, sure. I just think it's important that, that's how kids, this is why we don't have, one of the reasons we don't have secure, mentally, emotionally stable kids. Parents are absent. They're just not there.
Well, they're absent, or they're too worried about what other people think, or they're worried about their kids being their friends. I adore my kids. Right. They tell me that I'm their best friend. I think that's super great. When they're teenagers, I'm pretty sure that the tables will turn and they'll be like, dude, I don't like you anymore.
Right.
But that's okay, because that's my job. Because my job is to parent them and to show them how we act and what we do. And even with like schedule, it was summer. We just started school back this week. And I can see a difference from last week to this week, because we're getting up, we're doing our schoolwork, we're eating our meals at the same time. I think I personally have some sort of like ADHD, but it's also the creative in me, where I will be doing something and I will just be like, oh, la la la, and it'll be like 2:00, and the kids will be like, hey, can we have lunch? And it's just because that's how I run. I don't do it on purpose.
Right.
But the schedule is good for all of us when I remember to do it.
Yeah.
It makes a difference. But I've been saying it so much on our podcast that I'm sure that the regular viewers are sick of me by now, but it's a lot of our problems in the world today are because parents don't want to parent.
That's right.
And
that's
if they did.
Right. That's absolutely right. You're spot on, because a nation is really, if the families are unstable, the nation is unstable. And that's what we're seeing. The family, God made the family to be foundational. It's not an option. It's not just well, if you want to, you can, kind of thing. It's absolutely crucial that parents are engaged in the job of parenting. That means you might have to educate yourself on what it looks like to be a good parent. Maybe you didn't have good parents. Well, figure it out, because it is so worth it. And can I just say this? My husband and I did we recorded a podcast yesterday. It's going up tomorrow. It is a wildly unconventional conversation about family size. And it's not, everybody should have a big family because we had a big family. That's not the message at all. You can listen to it to hear the message. But what we talked about was just how when you are raising your kids, you're not just raising your kids, you are raising your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren and your great-great-grandchildren. We so often don't look past the parenting because it's right here, it's right in front of us. It's can be all consuming. And especially if we're trying to, take in all these other versions of parenting and implement them, which you can't, because you cannot do it all. You have to figure out what works for you, figure out what's good for your family. That's probably a better way to put it, what breathes life into your family, and do that, and stop looking at everybody else and just focus and stay engaged with what God's given you. But the thing that I think we don't realize when we're in that process is how these kids are raised is going to determine what kind of spouse they choose. It's also going to determine how they're just sort of like the journey that their marriage takes. There's a certain amount of it that, if I'm showing them what a good marriage looks like, in my relationship with my husband, that's probably the number one thing, is model it. But also, like I've noticed, like in the siblings, in encouraging the sibling relationships and working through conflict, they're learning all those skills that they will need to implement when they're married. And so there's things that we taught our kids, there is a difference between boys and girls. And, no matter what anybody tells you, you can't change the DNA or whatever. You can't change that. Like it is what it is. You can try to change everything on the outside, but
you still, we have a guest that we've had on a couple of times. Her name is the famous artist Bertie Rose. She's the famous artist because since people can choose their pronouns, she has decided that she is the famous artist. And she has this bag. I actually have one to give away to our people in a couple of weeks, but it says female to the bone, because everybody is trying to change what the definition. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but Matt Walsh put out the documentary that is What is a Woman?
Yeah.
My husband and I watched. My husband watched it with me. I might have watched it by myself, but it was insane. All of these people that are like scholars, which is why as a parent that doesn't actually know what they're doing half the time, I'm like, I'm as educated as those people are.
Probably more so. Yeah, it's so true. And so when we were having the kids work through conflict and things like that, we were giving them skills for healthy relationships, and we got to oversee all of that so that they were getting the values that we felt were important. And because we're adults and we've lived a little longer than them, we do know more than them, and we know that kids they're not born wise. That's something they have to learn. They have to be taught. They have to, they have to grow in wisdom. And that's our job as a parent. And so back to the multi-generational thing, it's, choosing the spouses. And then it's, as they have and raise their children, they look back and they pull things from when we were raising them. And I'm watching our kids do this, and it's hysterical. It's really funny, and it's fun. And it's like, you sit back and you go, wow, it was so worth all the work and the tears and the praying and the crying and the, all the things that needed to happen in order to raise these 8 kids, in order to do it well. Not perfectly, don't be confused with perfect, because that's not the case at all, but just such a blessing to watch that and to know that, okay, we did that. And now that's going to live on from one generation to the next generation. They're not going to pull everything from their childhood, but they're going to pull the stuff that was important to them. They really will. And I'm watching, and it's really very, very fun and cool to see them doing that, and laughing and joking and being reminded of all the crazy things they did when they were kids and how mom handled this situation and that situation. And I remember one time we had 5 boys in one room. This is another thing. People think you got to have a lot of money to raise kids. You do not have to have a lot of money. You just got to be smart with whatever you have and resourceful. And that is way more fun than having a bunch of money. Because, what's the challenge in that, So we, for about 4 years, we were in about an 1,800 square foot house there were 10 of us in there. And we had really, really, really harsh winters. So that was a lot. We would get cabin fever by the end of the, spring and all that. But anyway, we only had a bedroom for the girls and a bedroom for the boys. And so we had all 5 boys in one bedroom. And we had 2 bunk beds and then like a pull-out mattress from underneath one of the bunk beds that we put the youngest one on. It worked great. But they were messing around and it was their bedtime, and my husband and I were in the living room. I can hear them and they're not going to sleep like they're supposed to. They're messing around, they're laughing, they're giggling, which is, it's really cute, but it was time for them to go to sleep. So I walked toward the bedroom and I saw one of their, I don't know if it was a BB gun or something laying on the floor. I don't know. I grabbed it and I walked in and I was like, I've got a gun and I'm not afraid to use it. And they were all like, blankets up, not another peep out of them.
Nowadays, you would get in trouble for that for sure.
Right.
But
if anybody found out about it.
But see, that's the thing. You don't have to be perfect, but one of the things that resonated from reading your stuff and listening to your podcast is that you're the parents your kids are supposed to have. Because some days I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Why am I like, I can't keep the plan alive. Why do I have these kids?
Right. Oh, I know. I've been there.
But
yeah,
I only have to keep 2 of them going. I don't know how I would have done with more.
I remember looking at my husband a couple different times and just like I was bawling and saying, if these kids turn out okay, it's going to be a miracle, just because I just felt like such a failure that day. And it was mostly probably from my responses to them. I was cranky, grumpy, whatever, but you know what? That is not what they remember. They remember what the rule was, not the exception. And so, don't kill yourself and don't beat yourself up over a bad day. I mean, obviously we don't want it to turn into a bad week and it doesn't need to, but it can if we're beating ourselves up about it. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, let's just move on. And, I apologize, make things right with them, because I think that's super important to say, look, I was wrong. Like that was wrong for me to do that. And I remember one time I was like, I always felt like, I'm modeling Jesus to my kids. And so I need to, make sure that I'm a good example or whatever. And I would go, I would totally mess up. And then I would say to them, I just want you to know, first of all, I'm really sorry for doing that. That was wrong. And will you forgive me? And then I would say, I just want you to know that Jesus would never act like that. Yeah. I just want it to be clear that you saw this was not Jesus.
Yeah, no, that was not Jesus right now. We tried, but it doesn't always work out. Yeah, I have a tendency to I'll ask my kids to do something and then I'll ask them again. And then by the 3rd or 4th time, my voice gets a little bit louder. And then all of a sudden everybody's scared of mom. And I'm like, I don't want to shout at you, but we're still working on the not repeating ourselves 1,000 times.
Right.
It comes.
Yes.
I hope it comes with time.
It does, but it's a lot of repetition. I told my husband, I said, I wish someone would have told me that it's normal to have to do things again and again and again. I mean, sometimes it indicates that the consequences need to be more grave because clearly they're not getting it. But just the whole idea of, you need to do what I'm asking you to do the first time and do it without complaining, that's something that is definitely on repeat for years and years, because we all forget, we want to do the right thing too as adults. And then sometimes we forget, I'm not supposed to do that. I shouldn't be doing that, so yeah. Anyway.
The other thing I wanted to mention about your book is that I like how you I love the stuff that you say about just focus on the 3 R's. I live in New York State. We have to focus on more than that, unfortunately. I have to, there's a lot of reporting and I have to teach everything. I have to teach history, science, health, they have to have music, PE, art, and then math and language, and so it's a lot. But I've this is my third year, so I'm finally finding ways of like doing it. And like, so yeah, we have to do history and science, but we only do them twice a week. Like, we don't, it's not the meat and potatoes of our work. So you talk a lot about finding what works for you within the confines of what you're required.
Yeah. And I think that streamlining your subjects, like you can do if the kids are needing to write something for history, or if they're needing to, that can be the writing for the day. Like, you can double up on things. And I guarantee that your kids are learning a ridiculously amount more than they would be if they were in a classroom setting. I have talked to so many teachers, and they say the amount of learning time is so minimal. So this whole idea that they're demanding that much out of a homeschooling family, they're not even performing in the public school that way. They're not. There's no way they can be, not in that group setting.
But I because I think about one thing you talked about, how one of your kids maybe for high school had some guidelines they had to meet, and so you kind of were creative in it. And I'm like, like, I like to do Bible with them. They do writing in Bible, so therefore they're writing. So therefore, like, yeah, we're still doing like our language lessons. Like, I have a third grader, so we're learning about contractions and like spelling. But we don't have to do that part of language every day. We can, we're gonna copy this Bible verse. Cool, that works. Or we're gonna, so it can seem, I think what I got caught up with for the first couple of years is that it can seem real daunting.
Right.
Like, I'm not a teacher. My husband, he loved public school. He went to public school. We started homeschooling because of COVID. And every year he says, they really got to get back in the classroom. They need to learn how to sit and pay attention and do this and do that. And I'm like, but do they? Like, for real? He's like, but they don't sit when you're teaching them. I said, because I don't make them. If I'm reading out of our history book and they want to lay on the floor next to me, I let them. I guess I could make them sit if you think I need to make them, but why? Like, and
I'm sitting here thinking, the point is what? That they learn to sit and be quiet. Well, do you think that they're going to make it to adulthood and not be able to do that? They're going to be in so many situations between now and then that aren't even the home school situation, that they're gonna do that. They're gonna learn that. I mean,
it's just, yeah, no,
I get it. It's like
you get hung up on but this is what we did, and I get it. My husband graduated in 93, so public school in 93 was light years away from what public schools are nowadays.
No,
not even a little bit close. And he's like, well, let's send him to a private school. And I'm like, but I can teach him private school stuff here and save thousands of dollars.
Exactly.
And we looked out into a great co-op. And so I said, but when they go to co-op, they sit, they listen, they raise their hands, they do all the things because they know how to act. Right. They're not like heathens. They're not just running around lighting stuff on fire. I mean, we've got most of it under control. Right. And they're still small. And even if they were in a classroom, they would be wiggling around, and because they're small.
Right. But they know how to sit. They already know how to sit. But why do they need to sit for 6 or 7 hours?
Yeah. That's not good for them. I can't be good for them.
It's not natural for them at all. I love that John Holt, he wrote several books. John Holt he's written a bunch of different books, learning all the time, how kids learn. Anyway, he was a teacher, and then he left the classroom and he started just doing a lot of research and studying of children, but he would not study them in a classroom setting. He refused to study them in a classroom setting because it's not a natural setting. He said the kids will not act the same there as they will at home and other places where they're more comfortable.
That's interesting. And my husband's like, oh, well, they're going to have a job someday. And I'm like, they can get up when we have somewhere to be, or you know what I mean? Like, they're 7 and 9. I'm pretty sure that they're not worried about being able to sit at a job yet. Like, we're okay. I think also you just resonated with me because last year I had a fairly major surgery and it threw us off of our homeschool game. And then I got shingles and then I got COVID. And then so from like Christmas on, our homeschool year pretty much went by the wayside. But when I went to write my final report, because I have to do reports every quarter, when I went and wrote my final report, there was still so much stuff that we had done without teaching them that I was able, like, it was a huge report. And I'm like, I don't even know how this happened. Like, it's amazing, you know?
That's because real life is a great education.
Mm-hmm. It really is. But yeah, so one of the things that we live in a clown world right now, which I think you're on the same page about. And in the 4-hour school day, you talk about how boys and girls are not the same. As simple as that statement is, it was very nice to hear because that's not what people think anymore.
Right. No, boys are very different. Of course, there's a sliding scale. There are studious boys, and there are boys that are just, they're boys, through and through, and just only want to do boy things. Okay. So, yes, the boys needed a lot of breaks between subjects. So they could do like one subject and then they would go out for a 15-minute break. I would like set a timer so they could jump on the trampoline, ride their bike, do whatever. The deal was, though, they had to come in when it was time to come in and then go to the next subject. And sometimes they were ready to go ahead and do the next subject, and that was totally fine. But I made sure that they had plenty of margin in the morning, so that during that directed learning, there were breaks in between. And sometimes they, when I read to them or when they were reading, they needed to hang off the couch upside down, or, hang out in a tree or whatever, as long as they were doing what they were supposed to be doing, it didn't matter to me. But it really, a lot of times they had to have something else going on while they were trying to do their schoolwork. Quiet wasn't good for some of them. Some of them needed, they needed earbuds, they needed music or something going on, or doing something with their hands while I was reading out loud or whatever. And, so I had a whole chapter where I talked about boys, because they're just getting the short end of the stick when it comes to education. The classroom is, in my opinion, the worst place you can put them. Absolute worst place. I mean, they have so much drive to do so many amazing things, and we are telling them that they need to be girls. That message is being sent loud and clear. To be a boy is bad, and to be a man is bad. And I could not disagree more. And we raised our kids, our boys, our boys have manners. They're polite, they're friendly, they're helpful, all of those things, but they also love to do guy things, and they're not ashamed of that. And they're really grateful that they were able to do. I mean, they spent most of their elementary years in camo. Camo and airsoft guns and BB guns and digging trenches all over the place on our property, and playing war and having airsoft wars, and you name it. They just loved the guy stuff, and I encouraged it because it was just, for one thing, it was a hoot to watch, but just seeing them thrive in that environment, it was just so much fun. And they're so grateful for that. Now, one example I'll give you is, like one of our boys, I think he was about 4, maybe 5, maybe 6. He was able to ride a bike, but he came in and he said, "Mom, can I ride my bike off the porch?" And so we have this porch, and then we had 2 steps, and he wanted to ride, just go off of it, and so I thought about it. And I thought, okay, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? He's going to crash and burn in the gravel. Okay. So we'll have to maybe pick a little gravel out of him or whatever, but he needs to do this. And so I said, you go right ahead. You can do it. He goes, "Well, I want you to watch." I was like, "Okay, I'll watch." So, so I stood there, and he goes boom off the porch and crashes and burns, doesn't cry, gets up, brushes himself off. I said, "Well, did you learn anything from that?" And he said, "Yeah, that I don't want to do that again." I said, "Okay." It was just, but letting them do the things that they need to do. That same kid came in, I think he was around the same age. He had been out and tinkering in the shop. This guy had left a ton of stuff in there. He was a sign maker and there was all kinds of stuff out there. And he loved to go out there and play with all of it because the guy never came back to take it with him. And one day he comes in and he goes, "Mom, I'm ready to plug it in." And I said, "Oh, no, Mom doesn't do electricity. But when Dad gets home, he can go out there with you and you guys can plug it in." And he goes, "Okay." And so my husband gets home. I said, "Hon, you need to go out there. He's got something he wants to plug in." So he goes out there, he checks everything out. He comes back in, he goes, "It's a really good thing he didn't plug it in."
Oh no.
So it was great. It was great.
That's so funny. I think.
And who doesn't want to have those stories, right?
Right. No, and
so those stories, yeah, I mean, they're just the best. And our 20-year-old daughter said recently, she was like, "Mom, I've been thinking about all the stuff that you let the boys do." And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Why did you let them do that?" I said, "Well, because they needed to do it. I would sort of like gauge whether I thought it was whether they were going to kill themselves or not, or whether I was going to have to go to the emergency room or not. And then I would just, if I could say yes, I said yes. They built bike ramps. They did all kinds of stuff. And a lot of things they learned on their own, like, "Oh, don't do that again because that was painful," kind of thing.
Right.
So, and I prayed a lot.
I think with that many boys, you probably had to. I mean, with that many kids in general too. I mean,
yes. Well, 4 of the boys were born in less than 6 years. So they were that close together. And so it was a bunch of malarkey. It was just a lot of camo and a lot of like stinky socks and things like that. But, I remember when we would get ready to, go to town, because we pretty much, we stayed on our property a lot of the time. The kids did a little co-op thing once a week. And so, we did get out. So that was good. And we had church on Sundays and we had friends over and stuff like that. But a lot of the time we were just there as a family, and we get ready to go into town and I would be like, "You're not wearing camo to town. That's not happening." Or we'd be getting ready to go to church and I would be like, "Camo is not a color. So you have to wear a shirt that has color." So, but they were such a hoot, and they are still so much fun. So much fun. Our oldest son is actually a software engineer for Amazon. Not something he wants to do forever. But he's really good at it. So I was just going to pull up this picture. Maybe I could show you guys because it's just too cute. I was sitting on the couch and our 23-year-old came in, and he comes over on one side and starts just like snuggling up to me next to me. And the 27-year-old runs across the room and around to the other side and does the same thing. And that's them. It was just so sweet. But anyway, all that to say, boys are a hoot. They are so much fun. And you just got to not let other people taint that or poison that, because it's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And I think that there's something that people are scared of if you have strong men. I don't know if it's that they are not as easily swayed or but there has to be a reason that they are trying to make boys be more like girls. And I don't know the whole reason, but
I think you kind of nailed it on the head. For one thing, I just feel like there is just an out and out war on the traditional family, just the traditional family roles. And because of that, they will be against men being men. And I agree with you. I think they feel like a threat. They're a threat. Like my husband is very much a man. He's actually an artist, but he's very manly. And And he is a very strong personality. And so he is not pushed around by anybody. And, that sometimes that, that comes back because, he just doesn't put, I shared our story earlier, and where it's like, people are threatened by that. And he's not an unreasonable man, but he is not going to be moved. And the thing that I loved about that while we were raising the kids was that he was not influenced by what other people thought, not one tiny little bit. And he helped me care a lot less about what other people thought. And it was so freeing to just be able to raise our kids the way we believed they should be raised. And because my husband, my faith tells me my husband's the head of the household. And I love that. I love that. It's been such a secure thing for me. It's not been a bummer. It's not been a burden. It's not been a drag. It's been great. But again, when he would say, we're not going to worry about that, I would be like, okay, we're not going to worry about that then. And it was great. I mean, there were a few times I would have gotten our family in a mess because I was worried about what someone else thought. And he would be like, oh, no, we're not doing that. And I would be like, okay, we're not doing that. And I would see later that it was very much in our best interest that we did not. So yeah, I agree. I think that men can be threatening, but the thing is, like, if they're real men, they're reasonable, like they're not just, it's my way or the highway, blah, 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 and that's why we want to raise those kinds of men. And I think that's really important. I've noticed there is a whole run on baby boys being born. I feel like almost everybody that I know anyway has had boys in the last year or two. I think there's a reason for that. I think good people are supposed to raise good men, and that's going to change our culture.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you said your faith makes you believe that your husband should be strong. And a lot of people find that uncomfortable. I mean, society has done a lot to take away the values that we have. And it says that the husband should be the head of the house, but it also says that he should lay down his life for his wife. It doesn't mean that they're going to be like, that they have to be this crazy, strong, it's my way or the highway. Like you said, my husband, I let him make most of the decisions. And then sometimes it'll be something stupid like, I don't want Chinese tonight. Can we go get something else? And he'll be like, oh, okay. Because I don't have to argue with him about everything because I trust him. And so when I do say something, even something silly like that, he listens to me because
exactly. I feel like, my husband is, I believe that his job is to live in an understanding manner with me. So he considers what I want. But if he really feels strongly that something else should happen, then I say, okay. And that hasn't always been easy, but every time I've done it, I have not regretted it. It's been a good decision. And even if it wasn't, like, he would learn from that, and I wouldn't have to say anything. We could just let it be, And so, but fortunately we're a good team, and he definitely, we respect each other, and I think that's important. We're equal, but different. That's how I look at it. My role and what I bring to the table is different than what he brings. And together we make a great team. And I think that's important for people to remember when choosing a spouse and when, walking through life with a spouse, Right.
Well, in this day and age, I mean, there's no quality, or quality is not the right word, but people don't seem to care about like having a strong family or having because we live in a society where, women should be able to do it all. And if that's a woman's path to have a job and do her own thing, that's fantastic. But we were made differently so that we can complement each other and work together. And
exactly. And we accomplish so much more that way. I think that's the thing that we don't realize. It's the way God made it. And so therefore it's going to be efficient, and it's going to always be the best way. You can do the other ways if you want to, but don't expect the same results. And I think that's the part where people get confused. They want all the good things that come with doing it that way without actually doing it that way. And it doesn't work that way, and it never will. So yeah, I'm hoping that, and I think I'm seeing more families saying, I want a family life. I don't want our family life to look like this. I think COVID was actually helpful in that. I think a lot of people had to really like turn in and face what they actually had and realized maybe that isn't what they really wanted, and made changes. And a lot of them decided to homeschool and some different things like that. So in that respect, there was some good things that came out of that. But yeah, there's still a lot of very lost and fraying families that are just not cohesive, and it's just not healthy. But I think that also as good families are raising good kids, that's going to make a dent in our culture eventually, because what happens is, I think those are the leaders. Those are the ones who are going to move forward and actually do stuff, really get stuff done. And so I'm actually looking forward to seeing this next generation come out, and I feel like they're bold, and they're at least the ones I know, they know what they believe, they know what they're standing on, and they're not afraid to stand on it. And so I just think that's awesome.
I think a lot of people are starting to realize that what they've been sold is not necessarily true. And so they're kind of starting to come back against it. Like during the whole Roe versus Wade thing, you saw the young college age girls who were like, we're the pro-life generation, we're the post Roe generation. And that's good. And I think you're right. People, I know we're going long, but people are, like people my age, or maybe slightly younger, because I'm kind of old now, but they're looking at things going, I don't want to have kids. And actually, we're the people that need to be having the kids, because that's how change is going to happen.
Absolutely.
And,
absolutely. Yeah. Oh, that's so funny that you say that, because my husband and I talked about that very thing on the podcast that's going out here soon on family size. Because what we said was this: you've got the transgenders, you've got the alternative lifestyle, whatever you want to call them. They have so many different names, but they're not really having children because they can't have children. When you try to do stuff outside of God's plan, it doesn't work. You can't multiply under those circumstances. You literally have to steal from God's plan. You have to adopt. Right? Because you're not going to create your own children. That is not going to happen. Okay. So they're not going to have big families. They may not even have any children at all. And then on the other side of the coin, if good, godly families are having children and raising these kids with values and with, principles and, just raising godly kids, in one generation, we could take over the nation, literally. I mean, that is not unthinkable. You look back in the Bible, that is how they took nations. Is God told them when he was taking them into exile, he didn't tell them to just hunker down and survive. He said, build houses, plant gardens, get married, have children, find wives and husbands for your children, and keep multiplying. Don't dwindle, is what he said. Yeah. And it was like, and they were going into hard times. And so when people say, oh, but times are hard, or times could get hard. And yeah, that's true. But like my husband said, he feels like his greatest riches are his children, like it's fantastic. But anyway, all that to say, there's a multiplication factor here that is pretty astounding. We've got 8 kids. We have 9 grandkids, but only the first 3 kids have had any kids. Mm-hmm. The other 6 haven't had any yet. Or not 6, sorry, 5. I can do math. I am a homeschooling mom.
See, I think that's what my husband's worried about. That's how my kids are going to do math if I'm teaching them.
Right. I figure it out eventually. But, we see them getting married, and we see them wanting to have children and wanting to raise them well. And you think about that in the next 15 to 20 years, that, our family will go from, the 10 of us to probably 50, 60, or 70 of us. I mean, that's
insane.
It's insane. So the potential is just absolutely incredible. And for us, it started with believing that children are a gift, that they are a blessing from the Lord. And if God said, oh, I want to give you all this money, you wouldn't say, oh, no, don't give me that blessing. Or I want to give you this wonderful health and all this energy. And you're like, no, don't want to have that. We're going to say, bring it on. Right. But when it comes to kids, and he's like, I want to bless you with kids. And you're like, oh, no. Why would we, cut that off? And obviously it's one of those things where it's a very personal decision, and we're never going to tell people, oh, you should have a lot of kids, but we'll say, hey, you should give this a second thought. Mm-hmm. You might want to rethink this and think about the future. And this is the one thing that we heard a lot when our kids were little. We would talk to older people and they would tell us, I mean, usually it was the people with the most money who seemed like the most successful people who said, I just wish I would have had more kids. We heard that over and over and over again. They had maybe one or two and they stopped because they thought that was the right thing to do or for whatever reason. And now as they're older, they just really wish they'd had at least one or two more or whatever. And we heard that over and over and over again. We're like, okay, we're going to think about that and consider that. Because my husband, he only wanted 2 kids when we got married. That was it. 2. That was the end of it. I wanted 10. I didn't tell him that. So I tell people he wanted 2 and I wanted 10 and we compromised at 8.
Yeah. No, that seems like a fair compromise to me.
Sounds like a fair compromise. Yeah.
That's so funny though. But yeah, it's a scary time to have kids. Like, I'm not gonna downplay that. There's a lot of things going on in the world that are upsetting. And after the election, I was really feeling sad. And in one of my homeschool Facebook groups, somebody had posted something that said, God gave you these kids for this time. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, because it's true. That's God knows what's going to happen. And I don't, and that's okay. Yeah. And I still have my kids that he gave me. So
that's absolutely right. You just keep investing because, what if our, you call them foremothers? I don't know. The women who came before us.
Okay.
Like what if they said, oh, no, I don't think I want to go across the ocean to this new country. Seems too dangerous for me. America would have, none of that would have happened, at least not like it did. What if these women said, I am not getting in a covered wagon and going across to some foreign land and whatever. Women have been much more courageous than we are. Can I just say that? Absolutely. I mean, let's just be real. It's not that hard. We're okay. We're okay. So someone unfriends us on Facebook. Who cares? I mean, just who gives a rip? I just think we have to have a much bigger picture in mind when it comes to raising our kids and having kids and homeschooling our kids. We need to just, stop thinking about how hard it is and just put on our big girl pants and do it, because it's so worth it. It is so worth it. You won't regret doing what you feel like you should do with your kids, regardless of what everybody else is saying. And yes, things are unpredictable and disturbing, things like that. But I just think we don't live in medieval times, right? They're not burning down our villages. And, I mean, we think about history, how many different times were in history that were much more frightening than this. And so we just need to, I think we need to think about that. And I'm not trying to downplay it, because I think it's the mental and emotional stress. I think that's really prominent in our culture. Like, we have the food we need, we have shelter, we have all those things. We're not running for our lives at this point. So
at this point, we don't know what's going to happen, but right now we're fine. But
I figure we just keep doing the hard thing, doing the thing that we know we're supposed to do, and kind of toughening up a little bit. If something like that happens, we're going to be ready for it. We're going to know what we need to do. And I think I think a big part of it is also just finding your people. Find your people, and not just your people online, but find your people where you live. Because those are the people you're going to count on each other when things go awry. You know, you need a tribe of people. And for us, we have our family. It's very much a tribe, but we also have a great church community. And we have different people in our own community who don't go to the same church, but are definitely on the same page. So resources, you want to resource things from each other, and stop going out here for everything. There's this thing, I think we've become so used to depending on institutions for everything. We've depended on institutions for church. Everything has to go like this, and it has to meet in a big fancy building, and there has to be smoke and lights and all these different things, and a latte bar, and, you know, all this stuff. And you think about the people in Africa who will walk 10 miles in the blazing heat to worship in the blazing heat, because it means that much to them to get together with God's people on a Sunday.
Right.
So, you know, we can do this. But I think that it's just important to find those people and to know who you can count on. And I think we got a little bit of that during COVID. Like, that was very revealing, because there were some people that were like, I thought I knew you, but clearly I didn't know you. And now I know you. and now, yeah. And then there's other people that you're like, wow, I did not know that person would be that, like, they would stand that strong and do that kind of, and all of a sudden this whole new level of respect for them. You're like, okay, those are my people. Those are my people. So think about when you have a crisis, like a real crisis. I was telling my son, you know, we've been through several crises, and I will go through my phone or even a mental list and to let people know what's going on and have them pray. And I know that those people that I choose, those are my people. And so I think it's just important for us to know that. But we become, like I said, dependent on institutions. So we've got institutional school, institutional church, institutional everything. You've got these after school programs. You have, you know, all this stuff, the grocery store. Okay. I'm just trying not I'm trying to become less dependent on the grocery store and more dependent on my own local resources and what I'm growing at home and stuff like that. You know, I just think it's a good direction to go no matter what. But anyway, I got off on a tangent. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
This is a place I can do that.
I'm happy to have you go off on tangents about it. But you know, the reason, and it's something I say all the time, is because they want your kid. There's so many programs for school because they want to get your kid. They want to get them early, and they want to get them indoctrinated.
That's right.
And you know, homeschooling is intimidating. Like I am not a put together person. I tend to procrastinate. I tend to start a project and then I will just wander away. I'm not allowed to read books anymore because I won't do what I'm supposed to do at my house. So like, I get that a lot of parents feel intimidated by it, but you know, when I had my first kid, my mom told me, do you know why babies don't remember anything? And I'm like, no. She's like, it's so you can make mistakes. I'm like, okay, cool.
I love that.
And you mentioned a while ago that, you know, the kids remember the big picture things. They remember the good stuff. They don't necessarily remember the day that you threw a crayon and yelled at them, which may have happened in this house.
Neither confirming nor denying.
It could have happened. I won't. Yeah. But, you know, you say it all the time that, you know, to be an expert in something, you have to have what, 10,000 hours of experience?
Yep.
And we have that. And just because we don't necessarily know how to teach everything doesn't mean that you can't do it.
Absolutely. You can totally do it. There is, especially, I mean, like in those early years, it's, if you're just kind of going into the homeschool years, that is the best time to start, because you can just roll into it easily, little bit at a time, incrementally. If you read my books, you'll know why you don't have to hurry into all the book work and stuff. But even if your child is older, oh my goodness, the relationship, I think, is what benefits the most out of bringing your kids back home, is just getting to know them again and working together on homeschooling. Like, bring them into the conversation. Like, what would you like to learn? And you don't have to do 8 hours of schoolwork a day. I mean, if they were in kindergarten, it was zip, zero, nada, unless they were really wanting to do something. I might read out loud to them or something. But, maybe first grade, half an hour, maybe an hour, just would incrementally grow as they got older and they were more ready for it. But even in high school, my kids didn't do more than about 4 hours of book work a day. I didn't want them to. I wanted them to have time to do hobbies and follow their interests. And a lot of those things turned into passions that turned into jobs and careers and, all kinds of things. So it's just important to have just balance in your life. And I think that's my biggest message in my books is, look, there's a place for book work, but it doesn't need to take over your life. It can just be a minimal amount and your kids are learning from real life. You don't understand how much they're learning from real life. And I try to explain what that looks like in the book so that parents can start recognizing, oh, look, my kids are learning right now as we're setting the table, as we're cooking dinner together, as we're going to the grocery store, and they're watching how you interact with the cashier and they're learning how to talk to other people. They're learning to get things off the shelf. They can count the cans when you're putting them in the cart. There's just a million different things that they're learning all the time. And so I think that's just important for us to recognize and acknowledge. And then we're teaching our kids things that actually matter. Like they're learning life skills while they're learning the other things. And it all grows together and turns them into this just kid that's this person who's well prepared for life and for adulthood. So
that's perfect. Yes, I am going to go back and read your book. And if one of my viewers comment on this episode and make sure you enter to win this book, because you will also become obsessed with it like I am. But Durenda, I am so pleased that you were able to join us, that we finally made everything work. It's been so wonderful talking to you.
It was great talking to you too. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys. Oh, and hey, where can we find you?
Oh, you can find me at durendawilson.com, and you can also find me at the Durenda Wilson podcast. It's on Apple and Spotify and lots of different platforms. And so I would love to connect with you.
Yes. And don't forget to follow us on YouTube and Rumble, like, comment, and subscribe, because we are still growing. And the more you do that, the more people find us. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you guys next week.